Hey, good morning, everyone. I hope you guys are all right on this pretty cold one. I hope you guys are staying safe with all the weather coming. Today we are in Ecclesiastes chapter 8. And this chapter it took me a little while. I studied through it a lot and tried to break it down as best I could. In my Bible, chapter 8 is titled Wisdom, Authorities, and Iniquities, right? Okay, so and I try to use that as a guide throughout this chapter. So what I saw is the first title of wisdom, the first section. And that's only one verse in my opinion. And so verse 1 says, "Who is like the wise person, and who knows the interpretation of a matter? A man's wisdom brightens his face, and the sternness of his face is changed." And so with that verse right there, we see a very common idea throughout the entire book of Ecclesiastes and some in Proverbs of wisdom and what wisdom does to a person, right? And so we see some positives, some negatives about sometimes wisdom is seen in a bad thing where we start to discover more about the world and how awful it is. But sometimes it's seen in a good way, like in this one. A man's wisdom brightens his face and the sternness of his face is changed. We see a physical change right here in verse 1, right? And so the next section is authorities. And I saw verses 2 through 9 being that section, right? And so verse 2 says, "Keep the king's command because of your oath made before God. Do not be in a hurry, leave his presence, and don't persist in a bad cause, since he will do whatever he wants." And so from verse 2 to verse 9, we see the central idea of listening to the authorities, and we are called to listen to the authorities unless, obviously it goes against the Bible and our oath with God, but, we're still called to listen to authorities. We still have to respect and listen to them and even pray for them. And so in this section, one thing that I wanted to point out was verse 6 that says, "For every activity there is a right time and procedure, even though man's troubles are heavy on him." And so the first part, for every activity there's a right time and procedure. Last week I talked about in chapter 3, we saw that as a central idea. There's a time and procedure for everything, right? But the second half of this verse is really what stands out, is even though man's troubles are heavy on him. So even though we're going through these struggles, even though there's so many things that we are struggling with and thinking about, there's a time and a place, and there's a time that God will move on, right? And so then we get to this last section. So verses 10 through 15, really we see a very common one word that just is repeated over and over, and it's futility. So things are futile, Verse 14 says, "There's futility that is done on the earth. There are righteous people who get what the actions of the wicked deserve, and there are wicked people that get the actions of the righteous. I say that this too is futile." So throughout this the entire section, we see that word futility, futile, be repeated. And I went through this, like, if I'm reading the book of God, I'm reading what God is speaking to us. Why do I keep reading that things are futile? Why do I keep reading all this stuff is worthless, is pointless? There's a lot of things throughout the whole book of Ecclesiastes that we see that word and we see that idea that things are just futile and futility is just everywhere. And so I started thinking, like, well, if I'm reading this to be uplifted, why do I keep seeing this, life is worthless, this thing of life is worth it, And I kind of struggled with that for a little while, but verses 16 through 17 really helps illuminate the answer to that. Verse 16 says, "When I applied my mind to know wisdom and to observe the activity that is done on the earth, even though one's eyes do not close in sleep day or night." Verse 17 is really where it hit. Verse 17 says, "I observed all the work of God and concluded that man is unable to discover the work that is done under the sun. Even though a man's labor is hard to explore it, he cannot find it. Even if the wise man claims to know it, he is unable to discover it." So there's so many things in life that we feel are futile, right? They feel like they're worthless, they're pointless, right? And so verse 17 says that their man is unable to discover the work that is done under the sun. So we work and we work and we work, and we can work from we're born until we die, and we can work, but we're unable to really discover what is going on unless we go to God. Unless we go to God and really, just lay it all at his feet. What we do on this earth is futile if we don't do it for God. If we don't do these things that God calls us to do, like sharing the gospel, right? And so all these things that, like, why do bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people and all that, those things that we feel, these hard-hitting questions, these futility things, it doesn't matter unless, we have to go to God. Those things that we do on earth don't matter unless we go to God. And we he created everything, and he has a perfect plan. Like, there's a perfect time for everything. He has a plan for everything. And, if we don't go to God and we don't ask him, and we don't go to him and see what to do the correct way and with the correct mindset, it's all futile because we're not pushing the kingdom of God. So I hope you guys are enjoying the study. We're coming to a close. We have about a week and a half left on this, so I hope you guys are staying safe and staying warm today. God bless.